Sorry, didn't see you there. I was busy eating some pancakes during this con. And we're back with another great talk. We have Dwayne McDaniel, and his talk title is Stop Committing Your Secrets and Improv Skills Everywhere. Take it away, Dwayne McDaniel.
Hey, everybody. I am Dwayne McDaniel. Said, I got basically two parts of this talk today. Stop Committing Your Secrets and Improv Skills Everywhere, like just got introduced. Talk about the Stop Committing Your Secrets part first, and we'll finish it up with improv. If you got questions for me, throw them out in the chat and the room 2 chat, and we'll get to them hopefully at the end if we get a little bit of time. I am a little verbose in my speaking, so we might not get a lot of question time, but I'll do my best. So I'm Dwayne. I work for a company called Get Crackin' these days. I'm a developer evangelist. I live here in Chicago, about a mile straight south of Wrigley. That's about all you need to know about that. Get Crackin' is a company that makes Git tools. You'll see one of them just by happenstance today, the Get Crackin' client to visualize stuff. We also make Git Lens, an open source project in the VS Code realm that helps people see their commit histories better, and Git integration for Jira, which does just what it says on the box. If you're using Jira, makes it easier to see your Git histories and whatnot. So what the heck is a Git talk doing here at PancakesCon 3? Most people don't think security immediately when they think of Git, but maybe we should be thinking about that. We all use Git on the regular, and all of our projects end up out in public spaces so people can access them. The code for those projects end up mostly in private repos, but unfortunately, they're not all private repos. Unfortunately, a lot of secrets end up in the hands of the wrong people. According to Git Guardian, it's a lot. There's 2 million detected just in the year 2020 alone, and they see that growing, not shrinking. Even though there are some awesome things built into GitHub and GitLab and other tools out there to say, hey, you got a secret here, by the time they detect it out publicly, someone else might have as well. So that's what today's talk is really all about, is the fact that you can have bulletproof security with an army behind it to keep you from getting compromised, and do all the pen testing you want. But if someone leaves a key out front under a rock, you're probably going to get compromised at some point. Now, no one's going to be dumb enough to do this, obviously, but this is a real thing that happened in the world. If you have ever taken a look at some of the locksmith accounts on the internet, I would highly recommend it. You think InfoSec has security problems? Actual physical space has a lot of weird security problems that you might not think about off the top of your head, but they think about it a lot and post things like this. So I don't actually blame the people that did this. Look at that code. That is an annoyingly long code. I would have problems remembering it. And unless there's like gold on the other side of that door, or high info secrets, top secret stuff, like if it's just the supply room to get the pens, I might do the same thing myself. It's not a good idea. In fact, it's a flat out bad idea, but it's a convenient idea. It's something that we did for expediency. Like, we just got to get in and get the staples, get back out. Okay, nobody got time to go look around for what is that stupid long code we put on the door. And we do this in code all the time, especially when we're debugging, especially when we're just like testing things like, does this endpoint actually even work? Sure, I know I should go set up my secrets folder. Sure, I know I should go do it the right way every single time. But sometimes I just need to quickly verify that service is up at the other end. And there are all sorts of tools to help me do that, like Postman and other things out there, even like simple scripts that never get into my code base to test those things. But let's be honest, sometimes I used to do this in Drupal and WordPress sites all the time. I'm just going to hard code it in there just to make sure it works, and I'll take it out later. The problem, though, is that it's very easy to forget we did that as we're moving along and working on other things in our code. And okay, I got that working. Now let's go make sure something else is working. Oh, I just got to solve this one little thing down here. And in the middle of all of that, we've all had it happen to us. We get that Slack message or email. It's like, hey, such and such is on fire and we got to go put it out. Or, hey, The client moved up the deadline. We need all hands on deck right now to go solve this thing. And what do? You don't want to lose your work, and you're working in Git. So you add, you commit, and you let it sit there, or you stash it and you change branches. Or if you're working in an advanced setup, with advanced workflows, you're checking out a work tree, moving over to that branch, just in another directory, and doing your work, getting that, like, okay, we fixed the fire, we did the hot fix, and then come back, and we're no longer on line 8 or 9 in our IDE. We're on line like 180, looking at something completely unrelated. And it's easy to forget. It's easy to lose track that, hey, I hard coded a secret in there. Now, Git itself is pretty awesome. And for those of you out there that might not be super familiar with Git, just a super quick recap of what it's actually all about and what it does. And then we'll go back to talking about the security issues of it. But Git just takes snapshots of your work over time. This is from the Git book, Git-SCM. If you haven't read that yet, it's a very boring read. I highly recommend skipping chapter 2. But there's a lot of awesome information and graphics in it. So as you're working, you can just take the snapshot, store that long term, and Git doesn't forget anything. Even the stuff you think it forgot, it didn't forget. Not for at least 30 days. There's all sorts of ways to get back at that. Although snapshots get stacked up one on top of each other, turn into a graph, what we think of a graph view. You often hear that Git itself is a graphical based protocol or set of ways to store things. That's very true. If you can map things over graphs, that's one of the things that our tool GitKraken, the GitKraken client, does pretty beautifully, in my opinion. The other thing Git does that gives you real superpowers is lets you make parallel dimensions and time travel. It sounds a little bit silly, but I'm really glad the Marvel Cinematic Universe is implementing the multiverse at this point, because I think in the long run, it's going to help people wrap their heads around some of the concepts of Git. Again, a little bit silly, but also true. The fact that you can have these parallel branching streams, and all of them are real. All of them can be messed around in. All of them can be traveled to. But it doesn't move just forward in time. You can also move backwards in time, as we saw in Ant-Man and the Avenger movies, the end games. Anyway, that's enough diatribe about Marvel. So Git is all this awesome stuff, and it lets you keep track of things forever, and gives you a way to collaborate with others and share those snapshots and manipulate it. But it doesn't actually deal with security in and of itself. Git is an awesome way to source control, manage your source code or version control all of your stuff. But to get every file is the same. It's going to treat everything, no matter if it's a .js or a .c or a .h or a .p, Python or whatever you call it. It just thinks, hey, there's a bunch of text in a file. If it's not a bunch of text in a file and it's just a blob, a binary log object, it's going to say, okay, I'm tracking that too. That's cool. It's just a bunch of ones and zeros in a file. I got it. And it's going to treat it all the same. Git, after all, is the stupid content tracker. If you ever want to see the sense of humor of the Linux crew that started building Git back in 2005, just start looking at the manual. There's all sorts of weird little references to Git's dumb. Git is a stupid content tracker. It does exactly what you tell it, no more, no less. And that's good. And it's also horrifying. Now, Git does provide a way out of the box to not track things. And hopefully this isn't brand new information. Hopefully everyone on here has already heard of a git ignore file. If not, you can simply make a file, a .git ignore file, and say, hey, Git, don't pay attention to these things. Don't ever actually track these things. So when I commit something, don't put this in that commit for long-term storage. And if we all just put all of our secrets in files that were tracked with git ignore, that would kind of be the end of the talk. But also, before I move on, Hopefully someone's explained this. This is no time in today's talk to explain like why you use the secrets.json and what that's all about. But the short answer is never hard code your API keys into your code ever, if you can at all help it. I know it's so tempting to do that, but again, I wouldn't be giving this talk if people didn't actually do this on the regular. I know I have done it way too many times to admit. In a perfect world, I would just never do it. I would use git ignore and move about my day and everybody be safe. But if we think back to those numbers from the Git report, there's at least 2 million secrets out there, way more probably at this point, 2 years after that report got made. And if you commit something locally, it's not the end of the world, because you've just committed it locally. You can pull it out of the repo and no one will ever see it. But if you commit it and then push it, you're going to have a bad time, because once it's pushed, it's in a state where it's going to be painful to get it back out. Now you can remove things from public repos and from private repos and go do anything to the graph you want. That's one of the super awesome powers about Git. You have full control over that graph, that you can go and manipulate it however you see fit. But when you push it public, well, other people are going to know about that. And now it's no longer, hey, I did this on my own. Oopsie, I fixed it. Now you got to go probably ask someone for permission to go manipulate the entire repo at once. Now your fingerprints are going to be all over old commits. Now it's going to start getting a lot of eyeballs on you and a lot of strange questions on like, well, why did you do that? So when I say painful, I don't mean technically painful. It isn't easy. It's a little bit tricky. You got to do some pretty deep Git foo to make it work. Now, once it is pushed public, there are a bunch of tools that can help you with this. Static code tool analysis, or static code analysis tools, SonarLint, GitHub Advanced Security automatically does this. We'll go through and look for things that like, hey, that looks like a key, and tell you. But by the time it's gotten there, it's kind of already too late. If you've ever cloned something and like, oh, I'm just going to push this over here. It was easier to push it public so I could share it with someone else. That's where a lot of these secrets get leaked, where we didn't mean to, but it accidentally popped out there. So what we really want at the end of all of this is some kind of automaton, a robot, if you will, that will say, hey, stop doing that. Don't commit that thing. And Git provides a way to do this. Git has built in it since the beginning, inside the Git folder. That's what you're looking at here. If you've never looked inside a Git folder, highly recommend it. It helps you wrap your head around what's going on, especially with things like head. Head is not a scary folder to look into at all. I'm going to jump over to VS Code real quick and look in my Git folder. And if you look at like your head is 1 line long. Head simply tells Git what you're pointing at. So every time you see a message of like detached head, it just means head's no longer pointing to the top of the graph. That's all that means. So once you start digging around in here and realize what's in these files, Git becomes a lot less scary, a lot less onerous, and it's less like, oh, it's just a bunch of text files keeping track of where I am in my commit log. That's all it really does, except for this hooks folder. Hooks is a pretty awesome system that lets you build your own Rube Goldberg devices. If you don't know Rube Goldberg, this is from Wikipedia, that picture. Rube Goldberg drew these awesome drawings back in the 20s and 40s that showed all of these crazy contraptions. Did this, then do that. He imagined the world of if then that, or Zapier, or however you want to glue things together, and presented it in a comical way. And so these over elaborate things. So you can build all of the elaborate contraptions and if then that devices you want inside of Git. Pretty straightforward to do it too. So Git actually comes with a bunch of samples. So if you go look at a Git hooks folder, you'll see all of these things .sample. And if you start looking around on it, it's like, okay, I can see it's a shell script. And then, Oh, it starts getting complicated pretty quick, because what the heck is git rev parse? It's a good thing to know, I'm not going to lie, but I'm not here to teach it to you either. Git hash object, like what on earth is that? We start getting into the the plumbing of Git. If you look at the Git command line program, there's two parts. There's a part called the porcelain, which is what we normally deal with, and then there's the plumbing, everything underneath it. So things like rev parse and git hash live in the plumbing deep below the porcelain. Porcelain things like git add and git commit, higher level commands that do a bunch of lower level commands just packaged up, so you don't have to worry about them. Anyway, this all gets really confusing really fast unless you live in Git day in, day out. I'm fortunate enough to have a career that has pushed me in that direction, and I think about Git way too much. But unless you're somebody that does that and lives and thinks about scripting a lot, or you're Linus himself, let's never forget that Git came out of Linus Torvalds' brain trying to manage Linux patches. That's where it came from. So unless you're trying to build the Git kernel and manage a bunch of patches people are submitting to you, parts of Git might not be obvious. To Linus it was, to you maybe not so much, but there's plenty of documentation, and never be scared. You can't really blow up a Git instance. You can, but you can always get back to where you're going. But anyway, Git hooks, they might look scary and like, what on earth is going on here? But if you strip all that away, Git hooks are just scripts. That's all they are, that trigger at a very specific instance in the Git process. So here, every time I go, commit message gets written, actually I succeed in making a commit message happen into the log, I insert iconhas dad joke. So if you're not familiar with iconhasdadjoke.com, it's an awesome API you can hit and a website that spits out a dad joke. So in this case, why did the teddy bear say no to dessert? Because he was stuffed. Terrible joke. They're all terrible, but it's fun. It's fun to have bad jokes in your logs. You can go back, and no matter how mad you are or upset about something dumb you did a few commits ago, at least you got that dad joke to cheer you up. That's my theory anyway. But you can have any language you want. I personally love Bash. I grew up writing it, so it's my go-to if I need to do a thing real quick. But JavaScript, Python, whatever, as long as you can evaluate to that environment and actually execute that script as an executable, you're good to go. So there's no limit on what you can do with this. So if we think back to the problem we have, all right, what do I want to do? I want to stop committing code. So I'm going to say, hey, computer, every time I commit, check my code for any username and passwords, API keys, security certificates, and any other credentials that I might define. And if any of those are detected, just throw an error and don't let me make that commit. Just stop things. This actually isn't that difficult on the surface. Again, there are a bunch of hooks we can connect to or hook into. These all apply to all come from the Git porcelain I was talking about earlier. So whenever you do a thing in Git, there's a bunch of sub things that probably are happening. Along the path, it's saying, hey, go look in the Git folder, see if in the hooks folder, there is something called like pre-commit or post-checkout or update or post-rewrite. If something's there, go run that before we move on to the next step or this process. There's a wonderful website Matthew Hudson has put together, Git Hooks, that explains this all very succinctly, very well. I highly recommend going and checking that out as you dig into this further. But for our purposes, for this talk and for this set of exercises, we care about those three hooks that trigger before a commit actually happens. So pre-commit, prepare commit message, and commit message. You can put it at any one of those. Pre-commit is the earliest one. Prepare commit message is the second earliest, and commit message is the third one that gets executed overall. So building on ourselves would look something like this. If this regular expression, that's what this line means, get grep minus e, that just says evaluate this as a regular expression, regex, good old regex. It's terrifying and awesomely powerful at the same time. If that's true or that's true, then spit out an error message and exit. Same thing is if I have something that is 20 characters long, that is made up of capitals and letters, or capitals and numbers, I mean, it's 20 characters long, spit out no hardcode keys and exit 2. And I have a README over here that's got some passwords, some keys in it, and down below I spit out the passwords because that's the first thing it evaluated. It's like, all right, let's look for those. Yep, I see them. Kick out no hardcode password, and we're good to go. Or not good to go. We stopped everything. Awesome. But it didn't tell me about the other keys that I inserted that fall into the second case. So now I have to go back and rewrite, like, how do I think through that? How do I actually evaluate for all of those things at once? Is it just one giant if statement? And a bunch of other things I start needing to consider. And you can probably imagine a bunch of stuff that's not on this list. These are just literally the first 10 things I thought of, like, well, if I'm going to build this by hand, what am I going to build? All right, well, I need to, okay, how do I update for that? Okay. Ain't nobody got time for that. Like, let's be honest, your job isn't to go write a bunch of bash scripts. Maybe it is. Hopefully, if that's a job out there, let me know, because I love writing bash scripts against Git. But in all reality, your job is probably to do something else. And this is like a secondary thought to keep yourself safe. Well, open source to the rescue. Someone else has sat down and thought through all of these scenarios, has thought through this as a thing. And those people were AWS, the people over at AWS Labs. And they said, here you go. Here is this entire idea of just tell the computer with Git hooks to stop you from committing things, packaged up as an awesome program called Git Secrets. It's free, it's open source. You can go dig around in it. I learned a lot digging around in the source code. And like, it's just scripting, but I learned a lot about some bash tricks and some Git tricks that I really wasn't aware of. Like, you already saw one of them, but Git grep. I'd never used Git grep before I started writing this talk, believe it or not. I knew it existed, but started actually playing with it. It's pretty powerful, pretty awesome. Anyway, what Git Secrets does, you install it on your machine, you install it for every folder you want to actually track with Git Secrets. If you run Git Secrets register AWS, it does all of that stuff. It says, all right, I'm going to start looking for things that start with those characters and are so long that look like keys. And secret key assignments, we shouldn't let those in. Count ID assignments, let's not let those in. But we're going to allow for these two specific patterns, which are out of the book. Those are the example keys. And you should be able to put example keys in places in your comments and whatnot. That's cool. We'll let that happen. And then we're going to look in your AWS credentials folder and specifically say anything in there isn't allowed in any of your commits. And your AWS credentials folder should never be committed to that repository, just in general. So we should be good to go there. And it gives us an ability to run Git Secrets add to put specific patterns. Like, we know there are certain passwords or whatnot that are going to be used and might be hard coded someplace. We can just add those in very easily. And then every time you run a Git commit, it's going to fire up. So I have I get, clear it. Let's clear it real quick. All right. So I have a file that git add, and if I do a git commit readme, it's going to spit out like, hey, you got these keys that are not the example keys hard coded in there. You also have password stuff hard coded in there. And it just stops, but it gives me all of those instances. So that problem set of like, well, how do I know if that's the only problem I have with my script that I looked at earlier? Well, they already solved that. That it automatically does that for you. So pretty cool. Actually, I forgot I ran this over here. But when you actually install it, what does it do? What is the actual modification to your files? Well, it goes and installs this line into a commit message, pre-commit, and prepare commit message hooks. So it puts you 3 layers of check. So if something happens between your pre-commit and the commit message being made, where something gets inserted, it's going to catch it then, and just give you that extra layer of security. The actual thing it runs is this. You'd have to dig into how Git Secrets actually works to understand what this does, and we're not going to get into that today. But just evaluate the current thing that you're trying to do, and then go look at the Git Secrets. And here's the patterns it defines. These are just kept in your config file under .git. And you can see it's some pretty awesome regex. I wouldn't want to write this by hand. I hate writing regex personally. So I'm very glad someone else has done it. And I know there's some of you sitting out there. Oh yeah, I already showed this. But yeah, it catches all the keys and whatnot. I didn't have my passwords in there when I was running this particular example to make the screenshot. And note, those are obviously fake keys I'm using. Don't ever share real keys ever, if you can all help it, especially in, you know, public presentations like this. Feel free to use those keys all you want. They don't go to anything. And you're probably thinking, well, that's all great for AWS, but I use something else. I use Google Cloud. I use Azure. Well, again, open source is there for you. They already figured this out. It's nothing you're going to have to do the heavy lifting on. In fact, even in the original version AWS put out, they put this line, get secrets, add provider. So you can define your own anything. But Azure and Google Cloud product, Cloud Platform, I should say, somebody else already solved that. Go check out those repos. We'll make these slides available somewhere. I'll throw them out in the chat after my talk. You can go get to those and find those. One of the other cool things, and I think just enough time to demo it, is scan with all those awesome flags and scan history. So the first time you put get secrets in, you can do a scan, say, all right, well, here's currently what's wrong. So, but even before I try to make a commit, it will just detect, here's what's wrong. But if you put it in, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's like, you know, I thought I remember committing something and taking it out once. You can just run commit scan history. Slightly bigger. I can't on current screen. But get secrets scan history. Here's every commit I put a secret in. So now I can go back and do that surgery. At this point, I probably pushed it and it might be too late. I know for this particular repo, this little fun thing I'm building on the side that way too early to talk about, I know I've never pushed it to GitHub. So it's just local. So like, okay, whew, if this was an actual real keys, I could go in and surgery my repo before I ever push it to the public, and I would be safe. You might be horrified the first time you run it. I was the first time I ran it on a real repo that I have out in the world. Fortunately, that instance is gone that it was the keys to. So I was like, all right, bullet dodged, but it still scared the heck out of me the first time I ever did that against one of my real repos. But get secrets, go out and try it. In conclusion, for this part, don't hard code your secrets. Don't commit your secrets. If you do commit your secrets, definitely don't push them. Use automation wherever possible. We're only human. You be kind to yourself. Everybody makes a mistake. Everybody accidentally commits a secret somewhere sometimes. It's okay to commit. Just if you can catch it before you push it, your life's going to be a lot better. And open source is there for you. And if you find it useful, commit back. If there's a use case that, hey, I wish it did this, AWS is pretty responsive in their issue queue for secrets, and will help you figure this stuff out pretty quick. I know I ran into a couple like question marks and found the answers in issue queue like immediately. All right, let's talk about something a little more lighthearted and a little less threatening to all of our livelihoods, improv. And when you first hear improv, you might start thinking like, oh, improv shows. And I'm not going to invite you to an improv show. If you were here in Chicago, you're more than welcome to come hang out with me, the Bug House or the Annoyance. Message me afterward. I'll tell you when I'm on stage over there. But I've been an improviser since 2010. Started out in San Francisco. I used to run Barprov, SF Barprov, Elemental Improv. I was one of the early people in Piano Fight and End Games. Went to school at Bats. So I've been doing improv for 12 years now. Later this month will be 12 years exactly. And it's something that's helped me out a great deal in my life. And why am I talking about improv? Because improv provides this awesome set of life skills that I've never learned anywhere else. I mean, life does teach you them, but it's a lot more fun to learn them in a controlled setting and against the stage versus the rest of life. there's one picture I think sums up why we need improv better than anything else I've ever seen, and it's Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. You can prep all day. You can make all sorts of plans in your head. You can rehearse in front of a mirror 1,000,000 times. But until you're actually in front of a stakeholder and they ask you a question that you're really not prepared for, you don't really have to think on your feet until you're in that situation, until you get punched in the face. Having some kind of training or thought process to get you in the right mindset when you do get punched in the face is extremely helpful in life. The other reason I like improv is it's literally magic. I'm not going to read this quote to you, but it comes from Viola Spolin, the grandmother of all American improv. She wrote this book, but she also started a bunch of programs. Her son was Paul Sills, who started a little company called Second City. You ever heard of Second City Improv? That's a direct result of Viola Spolin's work. But it's literally what she's saying here. It's making the invisible visible. It's peeling back that curtain of reality. It's going not from what's possibly possible from where someone else wrote it down and defined the box. It's literally being able to define the box yourself and think outside of it, think beyond it, think in a world without boxes, and then pull that into our reality. In the context of on stage, there's tons of safety to do that. You can be an astronaut in space, like it's losing air, and the audience might be a little tense with you, but you're not going to die. You can shoot someone on stage, like point your hand at them like you're holding a gun and shoot them, and they'll die on stage, but no one in the audience think that person is dead. There's tons of safety on the stage to do that. But beyond the stage, all of these lessons actually make your life a lot better if you start playing by them. So we're just going to jump into 7 improv principles, and we're going to look at 4 exercises really quick. I know I got less than 15 minutes left, so these are going to go pretty quick. But a lot of them you probably already heard before and don't need a lot of explanation. The first one, everybody has heard this at some point. Yes, and. This is the core building block. On stage, since we don't have a script, we're building on what the other person says. Yes, like I like tomatoes. Yes, and I had the biggest batch of tomatoes you've ever seen. Yes, and I had some of those tomatoes, and overall, I don't think they're the best tomatoes. Yes, and they're the best tomatoes in the county, at least. And you can suddenly have a scene out of nothing. I just made that up out of my head because all I did was say yes and fill in the blank. This is so useful in life, especially when you get really poorly defined specifications for a job. If someone gives you a request, a ticket, and you don't understand what it says, your immediate gut reaction will be, no, this is dumb. I don't want to do this. If you instead approach it as, yes, I can do that, and I need you to define this part a little bit better. Yes, and that's going to add another 20 hours to the project. Adding more information, but saying, yes, we can do this, and it's going to have these consequences. They might not have thought that through. They might think, all I want is the background color to be green now. Yes, and we're going to have to adjust the rest of the color palette once I adjust that to green to make everything else visible and fall within ally compliance. They might not have thought of that. So if you approach it with a no, we don't want to do that because it's going to cause these things, immediately you're in confrontation. If you're agreeing with them and you're helping them sound out the idea, they're going to be, okay, well, they're not against me and they're just trying to help me. And you're going to get a better reaction. This goes beyond projects. This goes to making a shopping list with your partner. This goes to literally anyone asking you to do anything. Yes, we can. And here's the consequences. So always need jerk reaction, want to say yes, but also build on top of it. Not just meekly say yeah and go off and do it. Have the conversation. If it's something positive too, tell them how excited you are. Yes, and I think that's a great idea. And here's why. Yes, and is super powerful. Start with the obvious. Whenever you get stuck, write down what you know. This is also the core of rubber duck programming, but this goes well beyond just the world of programming and computers. Always start with what you know or what you think you know, because what's obvious to you might not be obvious to everyone. And sometimes you're revealing what you think is obvious everyone else will suddenly be like, wait a minute, I didn't think about that. That literally happened to me last week, where we were writing copy for something, and one of the new people at my office, like, we asked him, like, how would you do this? And he just like rattled off kind of nonchalantly, like, well, we got to do this and this and this. And one of the things he said that was obvious to him, everyone else in the room looked at each other and like, why didn't we think of that? We missed that. To him, it was just obvious. Well, he didn't think he thought he would be looked down on for saying something so obvious, and he was the hero of the day. So always start with where you think is obvious, and sometimes that is just the genius everyone else needed. Actively listen. I really love this quote by Chuck Palahniuk. Don't just listen for where you can put in your thoughts. We often do this when we're requirement building with clients, with stakeholders. As soon as we hear something like, I can use Next.js for that, our entire brain switches off from listening and starts building the application. I know this is true for me. As soon as I figure out how I can automate a thing, I will start automating it in my head, no matter what it is. I don't even finish listening to the requirements. I'll go back and read the requirements later. So I suffer from not actively listening enough myself. So everybody does it. But if you put your full attention to what they're saying and actively listen, not just to the words coming out of their mouth, but their context and what is behind those words, you're going to get a lot farther, a lot faster with pretty much everything in life. So be careful not to start replying before they stop talking. Give it a breath. It's never a bad idea to listen to somebody's question or requirements, take a deep breath, and then talk. No one's ever going to get mad for you breathing for 2 seconds. Hopefully they don't. One of my heroes and one of my teachers back in my days at BATS about a decade ago, John Remack here. You might not have heard of him, but in San Francisco, he's awesome. He's one of the awesome teachers out there. But he always said, start your scenes happy, healthy, and well. This really is assume good motivation. When someone's written you a requirement or asked you to do something, if you think like that person's against me and they're only asking me to do this because they hate me and they want my life to be bad, you're going to have a bad time with them no matter what. If you think this is coming from a genuine place where they want the world to be a better, and there's a reason they're asking me to do this, and there's a happy, healthy, and well reason, you're going to have an overall better set of conversations. It's like, okay, I understand you need this done. Help me understand why you think this makes the world better. And sometimes they don't have a reason, but most of the time they will. There's an actual thought process behind them asking the request, even no matter how badly documented, no matter how badly framed, just assume good intent. Here's a misquote from Charles Darwin, but adaptability is one of the things that makes us awesome as human beings. But we can get to a point where we start stonewalling, we start saying, hey, the best practice says X, therefore I'm going to do it this way, no matter what the outcome. We can get to a place of best practice says I should never, I should only use two-factor authentication for every single thing. And that is a best practice. And we are slowly getting the world to accept that. But if you have a client who can barely turn on their cell phone, that has no concept of anything beyond a password, and they have to reset their password 20 times a day, maybe that person needs some help. And maybe they don't need two-factor authentication for logging into their WordPress site that no one looks at. I don't know. I'm not saying don't follow good practices. Yes, where it makes sense, follow them, but don't follow them to the point where you are a zealot, where it's not processes over people. Let's never forget that. It's people over processes. That's what Agile really gave us. Ultimately, we want to make all the other players in the room look awesome. So make other players look good. If you end your day with your work done, but everyone else kind of like, okay, it's technically good, but now we look bad because he made us look bad or they made us look bad. No one's going to have a good time, and they not going to want to work with you on that. So make sure you're making other players look good. Realize I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go a lot faster now. Accept failure as part of the process. It just is. Nobody gets everything right on the first try. If we did, what a crazy, awesome world that would be. But that's not how it works. Most people are going to fail a bunch more than they succeed. Just accepting that accepting the failure and celebrating the failure. Every time you fail, that was a learning opportunity. And if you can show that, hey, I failed at all this stuff, but look how much I learned, everyone's going to respect that. Everyone's going to love that. If you constantly fail and you're not learning anything, there's a problem there. But if you accept like, hey, I failed, but hey, I'm not going to do it next time. Look at all this stuff I've learned as a result. Just writing up that as an end-of-year review or a quarterly review with your managers, they're going to have a better conversation and a much more honest conversation where instead of them pointing out your flaws, you're saying, hey, I didn't get everything right, but here's where I learned and here's how I improved my process out of it. They're going to love that conversation. I guarantee it. So let's look at, oh yeah, go ahead.
We've got actually just a couple minutes left, and we did have one question that I wanted to ask you. Let's see here. Fit from the chat. They wanted to ask, who was your favorite instructor at the Annoyance? And also, did you ever hang out at Messing with a Friend?
Oh, I love Susan Messing and Messing with a Friend. Absolutely. Bruce, his last name is escaping me off the top of my head, but he was my favorite teacher for level 2. He is one of the people that runs Hitch Cocktails. And I can't remember Bruce's last name. This is embarrassing in front of a live studio audience. But that's the answer. If you look up Bruce,
improvise the last name.
Yeah, if you look up Bruce from Hitch Cocktails, the Friday night 10 o'clock show, he's on their cast. He's been in that cast since the beginning. That's embarrassing. I can't remember his last name off the top of my head, but he really opened my eyes on like how the Annoyance style worked.
Fantastic. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming to PancakesCon and spreading wonderful knowledge, both of improv and also Git repos and better secret handling, as we saw. So thank you so much, Dwayne.